Hi everyone and welcome. We're down here in my wormery and I'm responding to a couple bits of feedback I got on my most recent harvesting of a couple of my bins. I had done a horizontal migration and I had all of the worms, or at least the majority of the worms I thought, jumbled up over on one side, which I was able to scoop out and relocate. And what was remaining in the bins was what I was treating as finished compost. However, when we were scooping the material out of those bins, it was clear to see that there was still a lot of worms hanging out in that material. But I wrote it off as kind of a no big deal. It's fine. Ultimately, if the material's going out in your garden, those worms are just going to do a good job anyway. Um, but a number of people have suggested trying to bait those worms out. So I've um, I've taken that suggestion to heart, and I figured I'd give it a go. So what I've done was I've set up a little kind of a baiting mechanism. This is actually the enclosure that the filter goes into for a pond pump. So this would normally be attached to a pond pump, and this would be the inlet for the water. But my pond pump broke down, so my pond doesn't have circulating water right now, and I figured this container, or if you want to call it a container, this enclosure has these nice large openings on the side. And I figured that would be a good thing to try to do some baiting activity with. So if you look inside, I've baited this with cantaloupe rinds, and they've been frozen, so you can see a little bit of the frozen ice on there. And as this starts to thaw out, it'll start to emit a little bit of moisture, which isn't the end of the world. Although the material in this container, so this is the container right here that I'm referring to, you can see that it's been disturbed a little bit. I've already been poking around within it, mainly to try to round up any sort of uncomposted larger bits of food, and that's what I've got over here. You can see my little collection of sticks and shells, seeds, even a piece of clear plastic that I picked out. So I figured this would be a good chance while I was in there anyway, aerating the material, that I would try to clear out any larger uncomposted bits of material. So like I mentioned a moment ago, the material is still a little bit damp. That's the reason it's just been sitting out with nothing more than a piece of newspaper on top, trying to let it to air out, dry off a little bit. And as long as it's just going to be sitting here doing that, I figured I would just go ahead and I would take that suggestion a number of people have made of trying to set up a bait trap in here. Not even so much a trap, but just something to help lure out the remainder of the worms that are in here. The lights are on overhead, so that's part of the reason you're not seeing any worms at the present moment. But if you were to start picking around here, so I'll just go ahead and I'll just pick around here a little bit, and you'll see right away. You can see worms hanging out in the material. Worms of various sizes. Some of them are still very tiny. Other ones are completely large, mature worms. And I guess the aim here is, as long as the material is going to sit trying to dry off anyway, why not follow the suggestion that a number of people made, and why not try to lure some of these worms out of the container and out of the material into this little bit of a trap that I sort of created, or a baiting system that I set up. So like I said, I've got this little rig over here that I was going to simply place down here in the bottom. But rather than just rest it on the bottom, I'm going to place something underneath it first. So I'm just going to take one of these coffee filters and just create a little bit of a platform for this to rest on, so it doesn't have to just sit right in the compost. And I'm not going to have it rest all the way on the bottom. I'd like for the top of it to sort of stick out a little bit. So I'm just going to backfill the hole a little bit too before I place this in here. So I'm just going to place this right here on top of the paper, and then I'm going to start backfilling it with some of this finished compost. And then we might actually see a few worms while we're in the process of doing that. So let's go ahead and move some of this material back down around the around this bait balm, if you want to call it that. I guess the main reason I was moving all the material around was to not only try to pick out those larger scraps of uncomposted material, but I was also attempting to just help it air out by sort of jostling the material around and creating little air pockets throughout it to see if that might help with the drying off process. So I hope it does help. I guess we'll see. I don't know how long it'll take for this material to dry, but it is a little bit more damp than most of my finished compost. Usually people comment on the fact that my finished compost actually looks a little bit dry and overly flaky, but in most recent setups, I guess my material has been running a little bit more damp than usual. I guess because we're coming off of a humid, hot summer time frame. It's now autumn, so these the bins that this material came out of were running all summer, and with the humid, damp air, the bin just doesn't really evaporate and give moisture off as readily as it would in the winter, for example, when the air is a little bit drier. Okay, so this is my attempt, I guess, at trying to bait some worms out of my finished compost using this little pond filter enclosure stuffed full of cantaloupe rinds. So I'll just try to cover up here a little bit so as to keep the tempting odor of that down before I put the newspaper on, and try to keep the any sort of flying insects that might be attracted to the smell of that away. So hopefully that helps. So this is just the first step in trying to see if we can lure worms out of this material while it's sitting here trying to dry off anyhow. So we'll check in on this thing on and off to see how it's progressing, to see how the worms are moving in. And once they start to break down the material that's in there and it starts to fill up with some worms, we'll naturally take those worms out and relocate them into my other worm bins. So I'll be curious to see how this progresses, and hopefully we'll be able to get a number of worms out of this material by the time it dries off enough that I would want to use it somewhere out in the garden, which could be happening pretty soon, so we'll see. It's late in the season, but I was thinking of creating sort of a maybe a cover crop. So I was going to maybe use some of this to plant with. I don't know. We'll have to see. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. So, all right, everyone. That's pretty much it for now. I just figured I'd take you along on this little follow through on what a number of people have recommended and suggested. So we'll see how it goes. Let's keep our fingers crossed. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, and if you like my glove is going in the trash at this point. I don't want to keep this one around since it's full of holes. Yeah, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. I always really appreciate that. And also consider signing on to be a subscriber to the channel. And be sure to ring the bell so you get notified of any updates that I publish. And also consider placing a comment down below if you have any questions or comments. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.